Hey guys, I'm just going to review my feudalism slides real quick. So, again, I'm not going to give you the full on lecture, but I'm just going to kind of go over the important parts. Remember that feudalism was meant to create stability for people, right? And it was basically divided by three different periods. The first was the early Middle Ages, so this is like the very start of the Middle Ages after Rome has fallen. Remember 476 AD, Rome falls apart, and immediately the Middle Ages begins. The High Middle Ages is normally what we think of with our knights and the Crusades and kings and queens and nobles and all that jazz. And then the late Middle Ages is the change, right? The late Middle Ages is the decline of the Middle Ages, where we have the plague, where we have the Hundred Years' War and changes in government that gives power away from kings and queens and more so to the people. And so the Middle Ages start with the fall of Rome because after Rome falls, people need a new way of life to protect themselves, right? We are used to Rome protecting us from barbarians. We're used to Rome controlling our laws and our customs. And then Rome's gone. And so what happens is people kind of start to wonder, how do we create a new way of life in order to preserve our freedoms? And so we see kingdoms rise up. Charlemagne's empire is the most important at this time because they are part of the Frankish Empire. So don't forget that this is a powerful group of people who created this new kind of warfare where they fight on horseback. And then in return for their service, knights are given land. And so Charlemagne creates this process of, hey, if you fight for me, I will let you have land. The Franks basically created modern day France. The first powerful leader was Clovis. Clovis became a king of the Franks at the age of 15. He is the one who creates the French kingdom, not the French Empire. But he does have Franks turn to Christianity. And so he's the first king who's like, hey, as a group of people, we are going to become a Christian nation. And so he kind of ties himself to the Christian church, aka the Roman Catholic Church. Charlemagne is going to come along and he's going to encourage education. And so he's going to turn France into the center of culture within Europe. So if you want to be the best of the best, you go to France. And then he unified basically all Christian lands in Europe into that single empire, which is referred to as the Holy Roman Empire. Um, the Pope crowns him the Holy Roman Emperor because Charlemagne makes a deal with the church. Hey, you let me rule this area and I will protect you. After his death, though, the empire falls apart like that normally happens because once a strong king exists, it's really hard to replace him. But the significance of his empire, and this is really important, the significance of his empire is that he taught us that if kings reward their knights and their fighters with land, they will have a really loyal and powerful army, right? You give me land, I'll do anything for you because you have given me the land that I need to survive. And so instead of necessarily paying with gold and silver or just being like, hey, you're part of the army, congratulations, it's more a matter of the fact that, if you're part of my army and we keep winning, guess what you're going to get? You're going to get a livelihood. You're going to get more land, which means power, which means money, which means a higher status. And so that's a really important lesson that he teaches us. The Vikings, you guys, are the number one threat in Europe. They basically come down. They're really fierce warriors who terrify everyone. They were known for attacking towns and villages. They were really quick at what they did. They would just arrive out of nowhere, attack the town, and then disappear. And so this is the final straw, right? Europeans finally are like, hey, we need a new system of life, which is feudalism. Basically, feudalism is a method of organizing society where we can have protection, right? People below promise their loyalty to someone above, and that person above is responsible for giving them protection, right? So if you look at peasants give their loyalty to the knights protect the peasants. Knights give their loyalty to the nobles protect the knights politically. Nobles give their loyalty to the king protects everyone in the kingdom because that's his job. And so we have our lords and nobles. They're basically the ruler or powerful landowner. They give protection in terms of like, here's land, here's money, here's a livelihood. Our knights and warriors, they're the dudes who are actually fighting. Like, they're the literal protection of the kingdom because they're the army. Peasants and serfs, they don't necessarily protect anybody. They are people who work the land, right? So they're the ones who need the most protection. Please remember that serfs are a type of peasant who are not free to leave the Lord's land. They belong to the land. They are part of the land, and so they are not able to move around. And that's the biggest difference between a peasant and a serf. Within feudalism, all the land in the kingdom belongs to the monarch, the king or the queen. Normally, it was just the king. Very few countries allowed queens to rule at this time. A large portion of that land would then belong to the church. And then the king was the one who kind of divided it up. He was like, all right, so this is my kingdom. I'm going to divide up the fiefs or plots of land. I'm going to give it to this lord and this one to the church, etc. The wealthier knights and then most lords lived on manors or large estates. Remember that this includes a house, a few villages, and lots of farmland. So it has to have all three parts. A manor is not just a house, it's not just a village, it's not just farmland, it's all three put together. People were born into the social class they died in. There was no movement. If you were a peasant, you were a peasant. If you were a knight, good for you. You became kind of the lower class of the nobles. Nobles, you were lucky. You were born into this wealth. And it wasn't a matter of like, did you make enough money this year? It's just that, oh, your name is this. You are obviously wealthy. And so it was a very different idea at the time. Royalty, on the other hand, basically kind of merged into if you were born to the king or queen, you were obviously royal. But if you're kind of the spare kid where you're like, hey, I'm not going to rule the country because I have an older brother, well, you became a really high end noble or a prince of the kingdom, and you basically were just extra, and then maybe you'd be married off into a different country to make an alliance or whatever it was. But they kind of floated around in the upper nobility and then lower royal section. The feudalism packet, if you still have that, you should definitely review it. A lot of the questions do come from the feudalism packet. So, looking at your information from the knights, looking at your information on what a manor looks like, stuff like that. So, be sure to review, and I hope that this helped.